Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. We are into the fall or headed into the fall at this point, which is crazy how time has been flown by. Just a quick thank you to all the listeners for continuing to tune in. I really appreciate all the support. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Today, I have Samantha McKenna. Samantha is the CEO of Sam Sales Consulting. She's an award-winning sales leader, brand ambassador for LinkedIn sales. She's an angel investor, a board member, a highly sought-after speaker. She's broken 13 sales records and believes great sales are rooted in exceptional manners. She's consistently looking for opportunities to continue growing the company's philanthropic efforts. Sam, you have a long bio. I could keep going into it, but I looked at your reaction as I started off there. And I figure, let's just get into it here today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I think everyone's exhausted listening to that bio. So happy to get right into it.
I really appreciate you coming on board, and we got introduced over a couple weeks ago. And for the listeners out there keeping track, Sam came on the back of Zoe's recommendation. And so we are going to be making a donation today to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society on the back of you participating. And of course, you know what's coming at the end of today's episode. We're going to be asking you for somebody. But why don't we start here? Why don't you just give us a quick little background as to who you are or who you were before Sam Sales came to light, I should say.
I've been in enterprise sales my entire career. So I've been a salesperson. I am inspired by seeing others grow and helping them scale the things that I do really well to hopefully help them. So became a sales leader, but I've been in enterprise sales my entire career, and then started Sam Sales about 4 years ago. But yeah, I'm an immigrant. I moved to the States when I was a kid, when I was 5, originally from Switzerland, and then have been hyper competitive basically since the day I was born.
I love it. Where did you grow up in the States?
I moved to DC for a couple of years, Orlando for the rest of that. My mom was convinced there was a more diverse audience in Orlando than in DC, which even in third grade, I questioned her judgment on that. I spent a few years more abroad after college and then came back to DC, which is just a city I have a deep love affair with.
Got it. With regards to your upbringing, anything stand out around your circumstances?
I think one, just the manners piece. So I truly do believe the differentiator in sales is having good manners, thinking about the other person, having a great conversation, asking active listening questions, sending thank you notes. I could go on forever. But I feel like that was part of my upbringing. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs. My dad was in the hotel business for a long time before he went out on his own for his own hotels. And then my mom ran a couple of businesses in her career. And just getting to see them engage with clients, deliver exceptional service, think about them from a manners-driven perspective was an education in of itself. But I think it's such a differentiator because so few people really think about others in the sales process. They tend to think about themselves.
What nudged your parents to immigrate to begin with?
So 2 people in my family are from the United States, my grandfather, and then my brother was born in the States. But my grandmother was a foreign service officer. She actually moved to DC. She was jailed for women's rights. She met my grandfather, who was named an ambassador right before he died. And then my grandmother always wanted to move back. So my parents split up when I was 4. And then just about that time, when I was 5, we moved to DC with my grandmother because she really wanted to be back in her kind of creature comforts and with all of her people. And then my dad stayed in the States, and so we were in Europe. So we went back between my mom's business and my dad's visits about every 8 to 10 weeks, which was did not thrill my teachers, I will say, because I missed a whole hell of a lot of school. But again, I got to see them operate, and I feel like I got an education in business during my entire upbringing.
So you got a life education there.
Yeah, totally.
I read in part of your bio that you work very closely with military spouses, and I don't want to jump around too much, but where's the tie there?
Yeah. So I was previously married for about 13 years. I'm married again. But my first husband was an officer in the Army. It was a world I knew nothing about. And so after college, we moved to South Korea for about a year. And then we moved to Germany for 3 years. We were stationed about an hour outside of Frankfurt. And the wildest thing to me was I did not have an especially, dignified or distinguished degree. I had a bachelor's degree in business from Florida State University, where at the time, if you had a heartbeat, they accepted you to the school. So I will just say that. But I was surrounded by these individuals, all of these spouses that are, the number 2 from Fannie Mae, an executive at Boeing, people with multiple master's degrees from top tier schools who had absolutely no job opportunities. It was wild. I mean, we were literally there for months and months while our service members were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan and had nothing to do. So I managed to hustle and hustle and hustle, and I got a job as a financial services kind of advisor for $12,000 a year, not to brag. But everybody else really has struggled to find work and to find meaning and purpose because nobody would hire them because, God forbid, we had the flaw of living abroad or needing flexible hours or needing to move a lot. And I thought it was just such a waste. So I made a commitment when I started Sam Sales. I was like, well, who better to hire? Insanely capable women, most of which are moms, most of which have to go through moves every single year, most of which can spin circles around us in terms of their process and proactiveness and everything. And I think part of our success is that we don't really have managers at Sam Sales. We don't need them because everybody's just accountable and organized as all get out.
Got it. And listening to you speak, a few things stand out about you. I feel like the fact that you're so cultured really distinguishes you. And, I mentioned life education earlier, but as you were speaking, I keep thinking the reason why she's such a rock star is really because she must have seen a lot, not necessarily because someone taught her, this is how you do things. And I think that's really how people stand out in this field. It's by applying the lessons that they've learned over time and understanding that, things like manners are a lot more important than one might think. I actually strongly believe that applying manners and putting people first goes well above, the best written email.
It surprises people. It surprises people. And I think you kind of think about customer service now, customer loyalty, the way we treat our customers, everything is so revenue driven these days that if we just take a pause, right, and we think about how to apply kind of these manners-driven principles to people who can give us nothing or who turn us away, or maybe are our least revenue-generating client, but still deserve our dedication and attention, all that stuff. I mean, what fans you will make for life, because you're showing that it's not the almighty dollar you care about. Yes, that's important. And yes, we need that to stay in business. But at the end of the day, what we really care about is building relationships, having a great brand, and just frankly, giving a darn about people. I will save the curse words for another day. I think it's also part of the move that we make every single time. Every time we lose a deal, right? And now it needs to be a deal that we've worked for at least a couple of weeks, right? If we send a proposal and they say things changed, that's maybe a different story. But if we're working a deal and we lose to a competitor, they go in a different direction, something happens, we send a handwritten thank you note. And I think my favorite reaction is from most reps who scoff and they're like, what do I have to be thankful for? I lost the deal. I'm like, you got the at-bat, you got the chance. Somebody went through a deal cycle with you. They considered hiring you. Like, why don't you just say thanks? And here's the cool part. The person that won the deal sure as hell isn't sending a thank you note. So what an awesome way to stand out, show you care about the relationship, and really knock that buyer out of their chair. I love it.
I love that. Just hearing you say you had the wheel spinning in the back of my mind. That and looking at the photo behind me that says "Show me you know me."
Oh yeah,
that's my next question. Tell me a little bit about that.
This is something I heard one of my mentors, Lee Cohen, say like over a decade ago. And I was like, oh, that's so catchy. Because I think he said something like, you have to show them that you know them. And I was like, I love it. It rhymes. Show me you know me. And so I just kept saying it over and over again. It finally became part of our brand. I finally was like, we should trademark this. So we finally did. Lee gives me a hard time all the time. He's like, I invented this. And I'm like, but I trademarked it. So anyway, it's all in good fun. But to me, it's about showing our clients that we know them from the very first outreach that we make to having them 10 years later. What do you write in your outbound sales email? How do you show them that you are not just the standard rep, but that you did research, you understand their space, you listened to a podcast they were on, you pulled a quote, something? How do you do that? How do you show up prepared for a call instead of saying, where are you based? How long have you worked there? Where did you work before? All that stuff, which is very publicly available on their LinkedIn profile. Do your research in advance. But don't forget that these people are not just buyers. They're just not just someone with wallet share. Who are these people as human beings? And this also seems to baffle reps because they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, dear God, what do they like to do? Do they have kids? Do they have pets? Or do they have a second home, aspiration to have one? Like, what do we know about them? And I think we often just see dollar signs in buyers instead of the actual humans that they are.
As I'm listening to you speak, I think about this myself, and I agree with everything that you're saying. And I agree with the validity and the importance of everything that you're saying. But a lot of times I think of the fact that that's how I want to be treated, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because like I'm projecting that on other salespeople when I suggest similar objectives and
Mm.
similar routes, because I know that personally, like I've had an up and down life that's interesting, and so
Yeah.
I want someone to know me, because if they
Yeah.
know me, then they'll know that my value is more than my dollar. Um, and I feel like a lot of times, and one of the things that I've learned over the course of Mile 40 is the fact that everyone has a story.
Yeah.
And if we just take a minute to understand what that story is, we can uncover a lot more. That could ultimately lead to more dollars than we originally expected.
It's what
Um,
we kind of get to a cheat sheet on that because we have we have a LinkedIn executive branding line of business where we build these brands for really important executives at really big companies. But part of us getting to do that is we interview them for their personal stories. And not only is it the best thing, but the deep relationships that we build with them while we're doing it, and finding out, that we're talking to Iranian refugees or people from
mm,
arranged marriages or, Australians who had Hell's Angels for parents growing up. I mean, wild stories that you
yeah.
would just never imagine. You'd think that, high powered executives have a run of the mill upbringing, and then you dig in and you're like, what? It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, you're spot on. And that's exactly what this is all about. I mean, we've uncovered so many of those stories. We had a female on 2 episodes ago who was talking
Mhm.
about arranged marriages.
Oh,
And yeah, and it's something that we just kind of don't think about in our day to day.
totally.
And so I also want to make sure we give the audience a little bit of an idea to how you got to Sam Sales. You've
Mm.
been in the industry for a long time. So why don't you walk us through your journey through the industry,
Mhm.
what brought you to Sam Sales, and keep in mind, the premise here. At some point, if there was a moment that served as your inflection point, let's talk about it. If that came later, we can go into that later too.
I'll give you my inflection point. So this is not a story I share very publicly, but I was actually fired from LinkedIn, and that's how I started Sam Sales. So it was a really interesting story, but I was there for about 19 months. I was a top performer, and I unfortunately had somebody in the company that really, really wanted my job and made it her goal to highlight what a bad leader I was and to get my job. And so unfortunately, I was put in a position where I had to choose to either fix my behavior as a
Mm,
leader or I had the chance to leave. And while we can all grow and we can all do things to get better every single day, there was nothing for me to fix, right? It was a bit of a frame, if you will.
mm,
And the interesting thing is that about 7 weeks later, the same thing happened with my replacement leader.
mm,
And there was an inflection point, I think, for that team that said, we think we made a mistake. And I said, that's great to hear. But I think what's interesting is that led me to start Sam Sales. I think at that point, one, talk about an inflection point where you get your dream job for a dream company, right? If you still cut me open, you'll find that I bleed Sam Sales orange from one arm and I bleed LinkedIn blue from the other. I am really, really, really passionate about what they do as a company and what their values are, right? That's why I love them so much. And I'm so privileged to have them as a client now. The fact that their motto is to build economic value for every person in this world. I mean, make my heart bleed. Why don't you? But I think what I love about this is that, that inflection point caused me to think about what am I going to do next? And my goal was to sit on my butt for 4 months and not do anything at all. Travel, hang out with my dogs, read, get a Library of Congress card. I had big dreams for this girl in DC. And me sitting still doesn't really equate to something I can do very well. And so after about a week, I put out a call to let my ego heal a little bit, my wounds heal a little bit. And I put out a call and said, I've left LinkedIn. If you guys need any help, let me know. And two of my former clients from the past said, we have no idea what we're doing in sales. Give us a hand. And I was like, okay. And so that's how Sam Sales started. And I think in a matter of weeks, I was doing work that I was insanely passionate about, teaching people the things that I knew how to do well. And what I thought was, I've made all this money for everybody else. And if I'm at one company, I'm impacting one company. But if I'm at Sam Sales, I can impact 2 or 3 companies. And that became my goal, right? I was going to work part-time. I was going to make half the money that I made before and just enjoy life. And that also went out the window very, very quickly. So today, we're almost 4 years old, almost to the date. We have an all-women team of 13, almost 200 clients, multi-millions in annual revenue. We're doing okay. But I will tell you that had I not been fired, I would have never, ever, ever, ever had the guts to go out on my own.
Yeah, it's amazing. So many questions. I'm just trying to kind of gather them in my head right now because this is phenomenal. But it's like, where do you begin when you're starting something like this, and how do you scale it to the level that it's at? Is there a system here, right? Like, is there a system here that is being sold to these different clients of yours, or is everyone kind of being approached individually? And also, I want to ask industries. Are you facing off against different industries right now?
Most of our talent, I will say, most of our clients come in B2B SaaS tech. So we have some outliers, some really, really big law firms, semiconductors, entrepreneurs, things like that, celebrity clients, some strange things like that are outliers, but most of it is pretty straightforward. I will say, like, in terms of starting this, you build literally everything from scratch, your collateral, your decks, your content, your pitch, your proposals, your contract, everything, right? From scratch. But I think for us, one was just the advising on my part, right? I was just consulting and saying, this is how you do this. This is how you write a great email. All the things I would do if I was a sales leader for that organization fractionally. And then where I think it started to scale, right, is clients coming to us with a particular need and me shrugging and saying, we don't do that, but we could. Here's what we would charge for it. Interested? And they would say yes. And then we would prove the model out and then say, we can probably scale that. So that's how every line of business has started, is a client need and then saying, I think we can do that, and then putting it together and then killing it with that line of business.
For the listeners out there, that's really a helpful piece of advice, because a lot of times, it's important. And I encourage people, take the job and then figure it out, right? Like, in terms of like how you're presenting yourself, like you're not going to know everything up front. And that's for a job where you're working for someone, which is in this case kind of correlated to having your own business and getting a task that maybe on the surface, you're not sure, how to go about it. Go ahead.
I think about that too, though, right? Like we kind of talk about that with entrepreneurs. I posted about this a few weeks ago, in fact. And I posted a quote about what I said when I started Sam Sales. And what it was is, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure if you pay me, I can figure it out. And our jobs are really no different. We have all this experience. We're coming to an employer that has an open job rec, and we're like, yeah, I can do all of that. I've done it before. Hire me, give me a shot. I can probably figure it out. But there's a need, especially as entrepreneurs, to make us seem like we're not small, right? Like, I see people post all the time that our revenue's grown 2x in 3 months, or we have 16 clients. And I'm like, there's no need to lie. Just say, I have 2 clients. Hell if I know what I'm doing. But you also give me money at a lesser rate than I'll probably charge in 6 months. And I can probably make an awesome impact. I think a client said it to me a long time ago, that they felt like they got in early on Amazon stock when they paid for my services. They're like, everybody else is paying a lot of money for our time. And we paid like nothing. It was great. And I'm like, you're welcome.
Well, that leads me to my next question, right? Because as you're evolving and as you're growing, one of the themes that comes up a lot here is knowing your value, right? Like, are you still figuring out your value now? And if not, and it looks like you're nodding no, at what point did you start to feel comfortable making the ask that you're making now?
I think it's the good old rule of supply and demand. And I think in the early days, because, if you're an early product, right, or you're an early tech platform or something like that, you don't have all the bugs worked out and you haven't gone through these processes before. And you're asking people to invest in you while you figure it out. So in those early days, I think my first proposals were $300 an hour, something like that. And then my friends were like, you need to stop that right now. Like, you cannot charge anything less than 500. And I was like, I don't know. Right. And a little nervous to say, I thought about that. I'd made a ton of money in my career, but still, I respect money so much that $500 is a lot of money, right? I remember when I made $8 an hour and I was really excited about it. So I thought about that, right? And I started to give these proposals out. And as people said, totally makes sense in 6 seconds, I was like, well, shit, I'm not charging enough. And then as my time got more sparse and more sparse, I started to think either I have to take some of this admin work off my shoulders and bring on another consultant, right? Or I need to figure out a way to buy myself more time, which was only to increase rates. So that just kept going, right? And I think if you hire me now, it's $12.95 an hour, but I don't do one-on-ones because if I train a team, it's $5,000 an hour. And I just don't have the bandwidth. Also, why would I work for a fifth of what I can earn? Which sounds very conceited, but why would I?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it's the type of things that people need to hear. And because going back to where you started this journey, going back to just the fact that, your parents came here as immigrants and that you were going back and forth, and, your life wasn't necessarily set up for you. You figured it out.
Right.
And if anything, this is a sign for listeners out there that there's room to figure this out.
Completely. And I think in terms of knowing your worth, right? Like start to set your rates, see how quickly people say yes and how much they buy. And I think also a chance for you to start to think about predictable revenue, right? If you know that your time is really in short supply, you can go to a client and say, I've got to raise my rates. I would like to keep my rates the same for you, but in exchange, would you be willing to commit to 30 hours for the next quarter or whatever that might be, right? If not, that's okay. They'll be happy to pay the increased rate because they already know your value and what you're going to do for them. But just ways for you to start to like slowly nudge your way out of your old rate hole and into your new one. And I think the other thing is don't forget the expertise you bring, right? If we think about our LinkedIn executive branding line of business, we charge $7,500 to write 8 posts. And people, one, say that makes sense, and others say that's insane. I could pay somebody, $100 to write a post for me, and you're charging me $1,000. It's our expertise, our knowledge, what we bring to the table, the thoroughness, the quality of our writers that have PhDs or wrote for the Ellen Show. Think about that too. Like, what is your worth in terms of experience, tenure, accolades, records broken that you're bringing to the table? Because that's all worth something. And it's not just the flat rate of what a consultant or whatever would charge.
If you know me, you know that I like to look good and feel good. As an endurance athlete who trains daily, I need my wardrobe to fit the mold. Roan creates performance-driven clothing for your active lifestyle. Each piece is designed for versatility and made with integrity to outfit you for an active life lived on your own terms. The Roan promise is to help you move forever forward. Use code MILE40 for 20% off online and in-store for new customers only. Visit www.rhone.com, that's Rhone spelled RHONE, or find your local store and move forever forward starting today. What is the longer term vision for Sam Sales? And do you even have that answer at this point?
I don't. I think I always say that I feel like I'm in a really good relationship and we've been dating for 4 years and everybody says, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? And I'm just like, everything's just fine now. Please stop asking. So I don't know. We jokingly say we're going to close up shop in 10 years and sell our IP and our trademarks. I just can't, I'm 42 this year, so I can't see myself hanging out after 52 for the rest of my life. I'm too driven. So my real best guess is I'll probably still be closing deals when I've got one foot in the grave.
I love that. I mean, look, your drive, it's so evident in everything that you do and in the material that you put out there. You could tell that it's stamped with a passion. And
thanks.
that speaks volumes about you. And I want to kind of also ask you about the purpose here, right? Like, what are the things that drive you? What makes you happy? What are your core values, right? Like, like I said in the very beginning, when I was given the introduction, there's a focus on philanthropic efforts, but where did that come from? And what is driving you? Like, where are you going to make your impact here?
I'm going to caveat this a little bit by telling you something just about my personality so you guys don't think I'm too soft. I am unbelievably competitive, right? I never, ever want to play second. I want to win as big as I possibly can. And I'm super, super driven by money. Now, that all said, at the end of the day, I am as bleeding heart as they get. And give you an example of this. So when I hear the ambulance sirens or the fire truck sirens behind me and everybody pulls over on the road, and I start to cry. And I'm not like with worry of what's happening, with the idea that all of us are coming together to get out of the way and do the right thing. It is really, really sad. But that's at my core. I'm somebody who just wants to help others, right? I am so privileged that I am passionate about doing something that also fulfills my bananas competitiveness and my bananas love of cash, as terrible as that makes me sound. But the fact that we get to do something where we help others, we coach them through things, we give BDRs and AEs who've been selling for 30 years life skills that actually make measurable impact to their process. And I think it's just the most rewarding thing. We hear, you're the 9th trainer we've hired and no one's made impact like this, because we're not solving, we're not doing rocket science over here. We're simply coming up with common sense ways to sell and think about others. I think, to me, the fact that we are very well respected and we're, relatively popular on LinkedIn also means that we get to use our voice for good. So in starting our charity event in our second year, right, we raised $4,000 for charity for 4 charities, like Global Fund for Human Rights, World Central Kitchen, things that just help people truly that are in need, Trevor Project, Innocence Project, Fisher House Foundation, things like that. Alzheimer's Foundation, which, my mom passed away with dementia, so something near and dear to me. But we have, in my humble opinion, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to do good in our world and to leave it better than we had. And even if it means that we can use our voices as a team to say, you get a lot out of us, how about you give something back on our behalf, right? It's great. I will say even one thing here. The amount of requests that I get every single week, can I pick your brain? Can I pick your brain? And I'm like, I don't know who you are. So we actually turn that into an opportunity to raise money for charity. And that's what we're doing this year. You can either give money to charity and get me for a lesser amount, right? So we're taking a hit to our revenue in support of charity. Or if somebody says, can I have an hour of your time? And I say, hello, I don't know you. I would love to give you time. There's only so many hours in the day. If it's important enough to have me versus a body, I would just ask that you make a charitable contribution, $150 for 30 minutes of my time, $250 for an hour. And what's amazing is A, it works, and B, about 90% of the people leave me alone.
Love that. I love that so much for so many different reasons. Is there a specific person or individual who empowered you along the way, and kind of left it in you, to remember that it is important to make an impact on others?
Yeah, I mean, I think my mom, honestly, like she was just an incredible person, wanted to also help others as much as she possibly could, and just was naturally generous as they come. I mean, my whole family is that way, but I think my mom really instilled that kind of softness in me, and I don't know, I keep saying bleeding heart, but that kind of, I'm a sucker for someone in need, and oftentimes I will give help to others to my own detriment. Like somebody who would say, we really need a sales trainer. And I'm like, you should reach out to them. And everyone's like, wait, you do that for a living. And I'm like, there's enough room for all of us. So I think, but yeah, just following my mom's kind-hearted footsteps.
I love it. When people look at your online presence and your footprint, what do you want them to know or to take away or to think, right? Like when I'm going through Sam Sales and I'm going through your page on LinkedIn, I'm thinking rock star seller, big time influencer. But one of the things that I'm uncovering in our conversation right now is really wonderful human. And
smoke and mirrors,
not that I didn't think you were a wonderful human, but I'm also kind of wondering around, like, what is with the material that you're putting out there, what is your hope that people are taking out, on the surface?
I think one of the things I would say is I feel like pretty much my entire career, I have been authentically who I am. Jokes, lightheartedness, giving people a hard time, going above and beyond in different ways. Like I'm authentically who I am. And I think a great lesson was somebody told me that my bubbliness, smiliness, and enthusiasm made me look junior junior and untrustworthy. And I was like, well, shit, that's who I am. So what do I do? But I think that's one thing is like, you can be precisely who you are, excited or not, funny or not, and still win, and still be professional and come across well to your clients. And I think the other thing is that I feel extremely strongly about this, that I hope people get out of my content is everything that you're learning in the sales process of like the cheesy methodologies and the cheesy practices. And, you have to make 100 smiling dials. What I want you to know is you can kill it without doing any of that stuff. I want people to know that I've won really big, that I've made a lot of money, that I'm a 7-figure earner now, and I don't do a single lick of the things that are all quantity over quality and that everybody tells you need to do, because you can win by being smart, by using data, and by just giving a darn again about your clients, like you've never imagined. So that's what I want people to learn from us is this is a real way to sell.
I love it. I saw your post the other day about prospecting, and same. Yeah. I've been in sales for my entire career and I've never prospected, because I'm just a huge believer that it's all about working smart over working hard, and in terms of protecting your time and making sure that you're putting your resources where they belong in terms of time and thought, and honestly leading with empathy.
Yeah. I've actually prospected. I actually love prospecting. I think I'm the only person on the planet. I've never made a cold call though. And that's what makes people angry. They're like, you're nuts, lady, cold calling where it's at. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I've done pretty well and never picked it up.
Same. That's what I was. What I meant. But you're absolutely right. And I think that you could be very successful, if you go about it the right way.
There's like a secret world of us, of people who have killed it and have never made cold calls. No one's talking about it. We should get some membership cards together. I'll spearhead that initiative.
It's funny. I was actually speaking to someone earlier this morning, someone who just left the company that I'm at, and we had a call, but he took it from a conference room and he was telling me where he was going and everything. And I'm like, yeah, man, just so you know, I've never made one either. So,
see?
So it's definitely a secret side. And he was also a high performer. And so you're spot on with that.
Awesome.
2 more questions for you, and we can wrap things up here. You mentioned the word that you're competitive, or the phrase that you're competitive a few times, and I picked up on that. And one of the things that I'm doing right now, and probably that I actually just announced, and more information is coming out on, is I'm releasing a second book. And the premise of my second book is defining the word audacious. And what I do is I break it down into 5 adjectives, and I talk about what those words mean to me as a seller, as someone in the corporate world, but also someone who's chasing down big goals in life. I would love to kind of ask you, in terms of how you goal set for yourself. I have no doubt you have some big goals that you've set and that you've approached. But was being audacious always something that was instilled in you, or was it something that you still continue to learn along the way?
I think always instilled in me. I think also the thing, I think it relates to the goals you set. So the audacious goals you set. I think a lot of people settle for, I wouldn't say the minimum, but they hear what they need to do and they say, I can do that. Whereas I say, well, how quickly can I do that? How fast and high over that bar can I set myself? And what else can I do at the same time? Right. And I think that one that can lead to burnout really quickly, by the way. So you need to figure out a way to recharge your batteries. But doing the bare minimum, or hitting my quota, I could care less about hitting my quota. I want to hit my quota in September or in October. And then I want to see just how much further I can push. I want to think about pipeline that I create, right? If I'm at 3x, I'm certainly not stopping there. If I'm at 5x, I'm like, well, I wonder what else I can do, right? I run a mile. Can I just run 0.1 more just to get a little schmoosh extra in, right? Official unit of measure there, schmoosh. But I think it's that. And I think it's always pushing yourself a little and thinking what else can I achieve, right? If I pushed myself a little harder, if I got a little smarter, if I invested some money in doing something, right, which is a hard thing for a entrepreneur to do because it's literally your bank account that is paying for this. But what could we achieve then? right? So we have a big financial goal for this year. We're just over 2/3 of the way there with a quarter and a month to go. It's getting a little dicey, but we are coming out of seasonality right now. And no matter what, we'll have our best performing year this year, we know. But can we grow by 20% of our best performing year? Who's to know? We're going to find out.
I love it. I love it. Sam, as we wrap things up here, the $1 million question, right? You were recommended to come on today because of you coming on to the show and graciously giving us all your input and sharing your background, talking about your Mile 40 moment. We're going to make a donation of $200 to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society on this $1 million campaign. And now I'm going to ask you for a recommendation. If we bring them on, we will double that donation to $400. So who do you have for us?
I'm going to give you Jen Allen. Have you had her on yet?
No, I have not.
Do you know Jen? Jen Allen. She spent quite a few years at Challenger Sales. She is one of the very few women in sales that truly can tell you how it's done, not what to do, but how to do it. And she's got a pretty dynamic personality to boot, so it shouldn't be a boring conversation.
I love it. We'll be reaching out to Jen. And once again, I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on, for shooting us straight, for, just giving it to us black and white, being vulnerable, being authentic, being inspirational. I mean, people are going to walk away from this looking at your story and just realizing that it can be done. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you back. Thanks for having me.
You got it.